Umarabajanadi. Um, all right. Great. This is going to be the eighth section on the precious treasury, basic space of phenomena by Longchenpa. Within naturally occurring timeless awareness, a single basic space, all things are present in such a way that they are in essence non-dual. Continuous dualistic perceptions arise as a display due to dynamic energy of awareness. In what is called awakened mind, there is no duality of sensory appearances and what the mind imputes on them. Within enlightenment, awareness, without transition or change, the universe of appearances and possibilities, whether of samsara or nirvana, arise with nothing to renounce or attain. In the experience of yogins who do not perceive things dualistically, the fact that things manifest without truly existing is so amazing that they burst into laughter. Although sensory appearances do not exist, they manifest in all their variety. Although emptiness does not exist, it extends infinitely, reaching everywhere. Although dualistic perception does not exist, there is still fixation on things having individual identity. Although they have no basis, a continual succession of lifetimes manifests. Although nothing exists that can be refuted or proven, pleasure is accepted and pain is rejected. Looking around, I find the perception of beings to be truly amazing. They fixate on what is not real as real, so that it certainly seems real. They fixate on confusion where there is no confusion, so that there certainly seems to be confusion. They reify what is indeterminate as determinate, so that it certainly seems determinate. They reify what is not so as being so that it certainly seems so. They reify what is untenable as tenable, so that it certainly seems tenable. Ordinary mind is seduced by trivial sense objects in all their variety. One's useless focus, moment by moment, extends into a continuum as days, months, years, whole lives go by. Beings are deceived by misconstruing what is not dualistic as dualistic. As a yogin with a pure mind looks within his pure mind, awareness, without underlying support or basis, is free of labels. It cannot be perceived in any way that can be characterized or described. Structured view and meditation are done away with. Given this state of infinite evenness, open, relaxed, and spacious, there is no sense of spiritual practice, for there is no distinction between formal sessions and the periods in between. Everything is unrestricted, completely equal, and uninterrupted. With no reference point, whether body or sense object or perception, there is infinite evenness without the undifferentiated vast expanse of space, and so there is no inner agent that can be held to have identity. As you look outward at sense objects manifesting externally, everything is unobstructed, vivid, yet ephemeral, random, without any reference point. You perceive, hear, think, are aware, experience, and feel as never before. What is this? Are my perceptions by nature those of a lunatic? Am I in a dream? You burst out laughing at yourself. You are free of any notion of enemy or friend, attachment or aversion, near or far. Since there is a unique evenness in that everything is equal, without any distinction between day and night, samsara, the reifying of characteristics and reference points, is cleared away. Since you have no concepts about the scope of naturally occurring timeless awareness, you have transcended the cage of acceptance and rejection, of what is an antidote and what is to be abandoned. With such realization, there is non dual timeless awareness. You have arrived at enlightened intent, naturally occurring and wholly positive. You have arrived at the point of resolution with no chance of falling back. Without any realization of equalness in its naturally occurring state, you may obsess on the word non duality and place your confidence in some state that you speculate has no frame of reference whatsoever. This is truly a mistaken notion, the dark realm in which awareness is not recognized. Therefore, it is the naturally occurring state without transition or change that the most majestic perfection of goals is experienced as non duality. The total freedom of the three realms, the ultimate meaning of the non duality of samsara and nirvana, is the fortress of Dharmakaya, the nature of being that arises inherently from within one's own mind, such that it is completely pure like space, yet is in fact beyond all metaphors. As long as you remain fixated on individual things, on this or on that, you remain caught in dualism, the cage of confusion in telling self and other. When you make no biased distinction of this, everything is the same in a state of equalness, with no frame of reference. And so Vajrasattva declares non duality is realized. This is the eighth section of the precious treasury of the basic space of phenomenon, demonstrating non duality within awakened mind. So let's go over. We're gonna go over evenness again. We're gonna do this little meditation thing, so that you have a feeling because they keep mentioning evenness and equalness. Uh, before we do this little meditation, does anybody want to give it a shot? Can anybody explain evenness to where we can actually experience it right now? Anybody want to try? If not, it's cool. We'll do the meditation.
I'll try to keep it as pithy as possible. Um, but every moment has the same general characteristic of knowing, no matter how intense or uh, boring it might be. It has the same characteristic of knowing.
Mm. Yeah, like a knowingness that's here now.
Yeah, like cognizance. It doesn't matter
Mhm.
what appears, but just the fact that it's known is
Yeah,
something that all
and
phenomena share.
it's exactly what you've been sort of your theme this week of non-fixation.
Yeah, exactly. Like, and when when you don't even need to, he kept saying what I really liked about this text is that he kept saying uninterrupted.
Hmm.
And for me, that's such a great way to put it because like when I just, just not even putting my mind on anything at all, and the fact that things happen on its own naturally, there's nothing to do, just knowing that it's
Except burst out in laughter.
yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's such a good theme. Yeah. It does feel like that in regular life oftentimes. There's a bit of irony in everything.
uh, Chapter 8, we got to remember that because I don't know if you all remember a couple days ago, I quoted that and I sort of slipped my mind where it was from. It was from section 8. Section 8. So, you guys want to do the demonstration to really feel what equalness, evenness is like? Or are we good?
Yeah, can we do it?
Okay. Yeah. As some of you might be familiar already, this is just where we sit here with all the objects in the room in our visual spectrum. And if possible, go behind your eyes, so to speak. Come into this feeling of your mind. Because even according to modern science, your mind is involved in everything, and you can feel that. You could sit here and actually feel that as a manner of speaking. You can sort of rest in that. There's a luminosity here, even if you close your eyes. It's sort of like a sphere of your mind. That your mind, you don't even need to speculate. Is it creating external reality? All this stuff. Just acknowledge at the very least this sitting here with our mind. Every object is within our mind right now, without even trying. So now pick an object. For me, it's a pen or a marker, red marker. Now go back to your panoramic, open everything without focusing on your object. Notice how your mind is still sort of magnetized towards that object. It's still pulling a little bit towards that object. That is fixation. That is clinging. It could be very, very subtle. You might see one little thing throughout your day and it'll get stuck deep in a subtle way all day long and it'll come up later. Cravings and things like that. That's how they work, on the subtle levels. Were you able to feel that slight pulling towards your object, whereas before there wasn't no any pulling? Yes, good. That's the difference between evenness, and you can think of your object. We do that just the same with thoughts. We do it just like that with perception and emotions. We're pulling on them, holding them. That's why Dzogchen is a process of releasing fists, releasing effort and doing. And we come into a state of relaxed openness because there's a cessation of doing, you know. So doing is can be very subtle, like when our mind sort of got pulled on or got linked up with that object, even though that object's within our mind just fine. We don't even need to fixate it on it. We can even use it and everything without our mind ever having that little shempa, that little hook, where we actually sort of hook onto it. It could be very subtle, like almost like a emotional act of consciousness where we get stuck on stuff. You can see an object of desire at the grocery store, and then later on that night, it comes back to you because you held it. Just like that, we hold everything. Yeah, yeah. Well, that's why there's suffering because this pen doesn't have an inherent existence. So, depending on my attachment to it, like I showed you a very subtle form of grasping, where the mind just sort of gets attracted on a very subtle level. On a heavier sort of level, oh, I really like this color. I really like this pen. This actually is a pretty good pen. It's got two sides to it, and you start to like really have all these reasons why you like the pen. And if now this pen doesn't exist, it's bound to break or run out of ink. And so the more I get attached to it, when the ink runs out, I get hurt. The more I get hurt. And so this represents all the things that we're attached to and we proliferate about. So, well, when our attention goes hand in hand with grasping, when I'm fixated on this, for example, are we agreeing that grasping and fixation are synonymous?
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. I feel it like when you kind of release your attention, there's this still subtle fixity on like that object you were just seeing, and it might take like just a little bit more time for it to like go away, but
Uh-huh.
you can still kind
Yeah,
of notice that it's still lingering.
but your attention doesn't have to be on one thing at a time, does it?
No, I was actually saying today what's so cool, I think I was telling Yeshi this, but um like for example, like if you just like I'm pressing my hand against the wall, and usually like our normal mode of perception is like to think that the feeling of my hand against the wall is like being received in my head. Like it's almost like I like multiply it. It's like I have the feeling in my hand and then I have the feeling of it in my head. But more directly, you can notice that attention is just that feeling itself. Like when you notice something or when you have attention,
Mhm.
it's right there. Like you notice it right there. Like when you hear a loud
Mhm.
sound, you don't hear it in your head, you hear it far away because the attention is right there. It's right with the sound. It's right
Yeah.
with the feeling. So it feels very like undirected. Like attention feels very like I get image that comes to my head oftentimes is like a bubbling or a boiling, like just a bunch of different like bzzz, different kinds
Yeah,
sensations.
I think that's the state of equalness is sort of free from attention though, because your attention is everywhere, and attention almost puts on blinders, right? If I'm focusing on this, I'm not seeing anything else in the whole room. And the idea here is that yeah, you can look at stuff, but at the same time, just like before, we were talking about sort of this subconscious and things like that. Uh, I think everything's here within your mind right now, and you don't even need to focus on individual things. That it just sort of randomly happens. You know, which is sort of like if I'm reading this book and my attention's on this book, it could still be non-dual without attention there, because those are the three spheres of conception. You know, attention has to be a facilitator in that. So it's almost like yeah, but the thing is, your mind is almost like the sun, in respect to rays. So when I'm reading this book, yes, most of the sun's rays are all on this book right now, right? But still, some of my rays are here and there, and on maybe what if I'm gonna have a cup of tea later, or when I'm going to sleep, whatever. There might be rays attached to all kinds of things. We could also classify that as attention. That's why Avloki Deshpara had all those forms, you know. Interesting topic. Attention, focus, attachment, how attention looks without attachment, how it looks without grasping. I think we just have to go into our mind and begin to see that, you know. Yeah, cut up.
we we can pay attention. Like there's an attention, they call it like the attention economy now. But the the awareness, the awareness is just a gift, always gifted. No exchange required.
A very interesting topic. If we bring it back to the dream, and you rest in the mind of the dreamer, and that's sort of your resting point, that then anything occurring in the dream, everything is within your attention. I think that's what happens with omnipresence and omniscience. It's it's the fact that you don't have blinders on. There's no grasping or fixation, and attention is sort of it's not a concept anymore. This thing that we call attention right now in Dzogchen would be something ineffable. Omnipatience. I wish I had that. Yeah, I always think because you could be a character in the dream, and your dream character is sitting there paying attention to stuff. Well, that's still appearances. That's still Nirmanakaya sort of appearances. But when we're talking Dzogchen, that mind isn't paying attention to anything. It's part of everything. We have to consider that the unconditioned mind is like space. It doesn't have locations, it doesn't have conditioning. Yeah, she says, I was telling Dustin today that I've been feeling kind of schizophrenic. I say this because I've been always so attached to being focused. So now, releasing into openness, the focusing habit kicks in a million times per second. Yeah, and I think it's sort of paradoxical. You're very awake and, able to respond to things. But this is still all just conventional ways of understanding. We're trying to apply our concepts right now to the Buddha mind, and that's again one of the four imponderables. It's as soon as we begin to conceptualize these things, we're molding what it looks like.
Yeah, I was going to say that I feel like it's interesting is that no matter how you focus on something, the only real way to like kind of actually obtain any kind of resolution is to allow it to resolve within awareness. And I feel like it's like great thinkers all seem to do that. Or like you get some kind of divine inspiration, but really it's these people who, well, they'll think about something for so long and then it kind of releases into their mind. And then at a certain point, it just becomes resolved. And like, I get the sense that, as a thinker, you're probably used to doing that with one thing at a time. But then with awareness, it's kind of like because you realize the individual strands of fabrication aren't really worthwhile in themselves. You're not really forced, but it seems better to release them, and then everything starts resolving because it's the same as the individual resolution within the fabricated boundaries of a limited attention, except because there's no limited attention, everything can resolve. So I feel like it's still even the same thing.
Yeah. Interesting topic. So, anybody want to share anything else? Anything on your minds today? Yes, you said. In a way, I feel unfocused, which bothers me. At the same time, I embrace the looking at my being bothered by it. Then all becomes good and shitty. I feel overwhelmed, bothered, and pleased at the same time. The schizo. Okay.
That sounds like a chode practice or something. Getting used to the shittiness. Pretty cool.
Right, and we're going to the point where when we call it shitty, that word is just consciousness. That's just an act of consciousness, even just calling something shitty. And then it's acting as an energy imputed on another energy. Like if I'm sitting here, if there's emotional energy here that I used to call shitty, well, the thought of shitty is also energy. So I'm having energy imputed on other energy, and now that all this energy is labeled and has meaning. you know, consciousness upon consciousness. This turtles all the way down.
in the exercise on equality, I felt immediately, of course, that little pull going back to the general ground, to the object that I first, but then I was like, oh, if I just pick another object and fixate on that, I will forget about that first one eventually. And curious, okay, how in the beginner samadhi practice, if we're looking back into the Theravadan, they'll pick an object, totally fixate on it to the complete dissolution of all other thinking. The thinking stands still in that fixation.
Yeah, they pay attention to the object for so long until there's sort of no more duality. It's just all mindfulness.
Bliss, awareness, no more object, no more observer of the object.
That's the Shravaka sort of approach, or sutra approach. We start with awareness, right? No. Yeah, Brandon.
And Dawei, I feel like I remember you talking about the kind of meditation where you pay attention to an object and then you switch positions with the object.
Yes.
What, maybe I wasn't listening so well, but Kanak, what you were saying right now, it reminds me of kind of Ajahn Brahm's jhana instructions, where he says, well, you focus on the breath, and then the breath disappears in a nimitta forms, or nimitta. And, it's purely mind generated, but eventually it becomes so powerful that the entirety of your mind merges with the nimitta. So then, you stop being your mind and the object, and it just becomes the nimitta with the 5 qualities of whatever. And then gradually they fade, and that's cessation, is when all those qualities have faded. So it really seems to be like an almost like, it kind of reminds me of like Mahamudra in that way.
Yeah.
I don't know what switch place with the object means, but it does remind me just hearing those strings of words together. It's like whenever we do like that turning your mind back meditation to like look at your mind, there's also this sense, it's funny because I've mentioned this before, but sometimes it can feel like you're looking at the world, but sometimes it feels like the world is looking into you, like into some hole or space. And it's really interesting because when you do that, like turning your mind around, that's oftentimes what it feels like. The world is shining into you. You can feel that way.
Yeah, I still haven't found the source of that practice where you switch with the object, but that's along the same lines of what you're talking about, right?
Yeah, like I feel like my sight is not coming from me, but I can, yeah, it feels like sight instead is like, rather than me being the person that's seeing, it's like something's looking at me or like the world is looking at me kind of thing.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think that ties into empathy and all kinds of things with non-duality. And if we want to peer into the logic a little bit, imagine again the dream metaphor. Well, if you're sitting here having a dream, let's pretend, like, let's really put ourselves there. We're going to sleep and we start dreaming. You're dreaming of your body, but you're also creating all the objects. So why wouldn't you be able to switch? It's both your mind, right? But because this is how powerful that seventh out of the 8 consciousness is. This is how powerful that seventh egoic consciousness is, that even when you have a dream, you position yourself in a reference point, even though there's tons of stuff in your dream and it's all made out of your mind. There is no reference point there, but you sit there and walk around in your dream like there's a reference point. Right? Anybody feeling me on this?
Yeah. I mean, it really makes evident how your mind is not like the fact that you can even switch your the focus of your attention inward is kind of like a clue that like sight or like seeing or awareness is not like a privately owned thing. Like the fact that you can somehow be in another place from a different perspective and still see that and look back at yourself,
Mhm.
it is interesting because how can I see from a different point of view that's not mine, you know? But you can
Yeah,
feel it. You can feel this sensation of being looked at, but it's
yeah.
only you that's looking. So it's interesting.
Yeah. And I think yogis, as yogis, you guys should really have a great time with dreaming and sleeping. Sleeping, they talk about this in Dzogchen, it becomes a sort of like a state of meditation, so you're doing this. I mean, dreaming for me is really, really fun. I love sleeping. I love dreaming, you know. I encourage you all to embrace it.
I wish I had a more active dreaming life. The only time that I've been able to lucid dream as an adult was when my friend, surprisingly, she came over to sleep, over whatever, and like when I was falling asleep, like I started lucid dreaming because I know I had this image of like the sun and the moon flashing back and forth. And I was like, "Oh, that's not supposed to happen." It's
Wow.
like, "Oh, that's not right." And then, yeah, when that image came to my mind, suddenly I was like, "Oh, I'm sleeping, huh?" But
Yeah,
even experiences like that, the fact, and I think that's actually the key point in a lot of these things is like the surprise or the revelation is that you can get rid of this self-conception. You can get rid of this feeling like you're the one doing something and be surprised by the fact that it's still sort of happening. Like it never required
exactly.
a self. And when you get
Yeah,
like rid of that, then it becomes like blown open or wide open, you know?
yeah.
So
The pilot sort of goes away. This idea of a pilot that we maybe we need that at first, maybe it serves a real profound purpose, but in Dzogchen for sure you begin to let loose of this idea that you're piloting this whole adventure, and you start to fall into this ineffable openness and see the true sort of pilot or lack thereof.
yeah, it's a sort of like, if I can
Oh,
use an analogy, it reminds me of just like even the idea of the resurrection. Like what I see is
mm,
like this sort of symbolic death, right? Like,
mhm,
you really die to yourself in a way because all you ever were these like strings of symbols and concepts. So it does feel like you know, a real death in a sense. But what you
mm.
find or what is really miraculous or like wondrous is that you end up your symbolic self dies, but everything still carries on. Everything still sort of works. And then you're like, oh, that was just always added. Like that was not, like a thing. And so you're almost like reborn again in this new life, you know, this
Yeah, I'm
richer,
glad
open
you
life.
see that metaphor there with Christianity. And I'm happy to hear that you're beginning to look at things sort of in multiple dimensions, right? Not just this outer that we're so used to hearing, but that's what's so fun about Dzogchen too. You can begin to look at a lot of stuff with more dimension now.
Yeah, didn't we read someone put in the chat the other day? It was like Dzogchen is like like looking from a mountain
Oh
and
yeah,
you can
yeah, that was Longchenpa that said that. We read that in the
oh
text.
yeah, you can
By the
do
way, I
that and
didn't want to get too lost with the. I think Jetson wanted to
oh
chime in
sorry.
a while ago. There, born again's Longchenpa.
I was just gonna jump in with what Lama Lina was talking about, like dream yoga and stuff, and saying, like, why do we have to have normal awareness in a dream? If we could do anything, become anything we want, we always tend to have a dream reference of, oh, I'm a person in a person body. And she's like, but you don't have to do that. You could become an animal or anything you want in a dream.
Yeah. See, that's why I love Lama Lena. Me and her are always like same mind length. That's exactly what I was just talking about. And that's nobody talks about that stuff unless you really start to see the mind, how the mind works. And so that's evidence right there. That's proof she has seen the mind. And when you really also a great point about night and day and dreaming and waking state is that they mingle together. They mingle together in the sense that your mind, it has to be creating this reality right now. It has to be, according even to modern science. Okay, and then when you go to sleep, you're creating another one, or maybe two or three realities that night. Dreaming of different things, and so you start to really understand how reality, how these worlds are a display of your mind, the energy of your mind. And there must be a cognizance, a consciousness that is sort of having this display. It's got energy. The mind has energy, so it creates the display. Like when you're sleeping and dreaming, the energy of your mind is creating the display. And what's miraculous is that cognizance that's having the dream, you can actually rest in that. You don't have to be a character in the dream. You can come to the source, the very mind that's creating. And when you come home to the source, it evens itself out. It works itself out because you're at the very source, right?
Yeah, I remember one time I was, I think, telling Dondrup about like not seeing a difference between like waking life and dreaming life because I mean, if you really pay attention, even like when you're even as you're falling asleep, you notice how the whole thing is very continuous. Like the whole process of falling asleep and starting to dream, and then the dream eventually starting to fade out, and then new appearances in waking life coming back. And you realize there's actually, like Longchenpa says, uninterrupted. You can't really like tell where the dream starts and the waking life begins, because if you're attentive enough, you'll notice how it just flows into each other.
Yeah. Well, the cognizance itself, even though these dreams and everything's manifesting from it, it doesn't change. And that's what's so miraculous too, is that when you come home to this cognizance, you notice that it's just like space, one of the metaphors that, and then all appearances are like echoes or like mirages, just coming from this space. And that's why I like the physics correlations there, because they have the field, the unified field, the Higgs boson field, they begin to have these fields of that are really interesting. So there's some correlates there. And Dzogchen is all about just coming into this field of cognizance. We can really frame that in a modern sense now, without a bunch of juju or any type of we don't have to twist things. We don't have to get too deep or crazy.
If
Yeah,
the field is awareness, then a particle would be a Buddha, the Buddha particle.
yeah, exactly. That's the whole idea of Indra's net, right? That everything's reflecting each other, so it's sort of endless.
Mm.
Yeah, you and I, our minds are reflecting right now. If we're reflecting each other, total non-duality.